Welcome back to another episode of Gators Gameday Live. I'm Seth Varnadore, joined by Bud Davis. Florida is coming off of a big win against LSU. Bud, you've had a few days to kind of process it. What are your thoughts and just kind of general thoughts on the game, and then maybe some of the momentum around the program that's starting to build up a little bit?
I think it's the best, most complete game we've seen from Billy Napier. Just both sides of the ball had a pretty good challenge and stepped up to it. Um, you know, played really good, um, exceeded expectations, I think, on both sides of the ball, which is pretty crazy. Good game plans on both sides of the ball, good executions. So, most complete game versus a quality home opponent at home in front of a big, Gator crowd, a lot of momentum. And then, we kind of talked about this was a big game for Florida going forward, especially under Billy Napier with the, renewed vote of confidence, from the AD. And we've seen that turn into some real, recruiting momentum. I think this class is going to be what it's going to be, which is it's not going to be a top 5 class or a championship winning class, but these are still good recruits to get. I've done a lot of research on, what predicts success, and, some of these guys aren't ranked top 100, and that's okay. These are still good wins. They're high school trench players. We've talked about how valuable those are. And then they're in-state, which is great. That's a low risk from a transfer perspective. So trench player in-state, that's a low risk take. These are guys that, give you time to develop them. They're generally pretty scarce resources, and getting those ones are actually how you build out a program for long-term success. Like we've seen Texas do it. And then probably one of the bigger things there is you're flipping them from, rival programs like FSU or Georgia. These are annual opponents, and we talk about recruiting being zero sum. They're not on their team. We don't have to play against these guys. They are on our team. So we don't just get the added benefit of them becoming Gators. We also get the benefit of them not being Bulldogs and not being Seminoles. So there's some pretty big wins there to celebrate. I think it's been, one of the best weeks to be a Gator fan in a long time. So I've been really enjoying it. What about you, Seth?
Yeah, no, it's been it's always a lot more enjoyable. You can consume more content, you can listen to more things, uh, just because it's a little bit more enjoyable when you rehashing a win rather than another loss. One thing I did want to get into before we move on to the Ole Miss game, we had a post game show, had some good stuff in there after the LSU game, but going back and kind of rewatching the game a little bit. And then we kind of thought about it a little bit on Saturday night. We talked about some of it, but I thought Florida did a really good job with some tendency breakers against LSU, stuff they'd shown a lot previously this past year through Billy Napier's tenure. And I think a lot of people, one of the big issues people have with this offense is a lot of fans feel like it's predictable. So I thought they did a really good job breaking some tendencies. So I wanted to show like 4 examples of really kind of big tendency breakers that Florida broke out against LSU that were really successful. So I'm going to go ahead and throw up that film now. So the first one, you go back to the first game of the year, right? Florida has a big tendency to run slant to the single receiver. So they'll motion, they'll get in they'll get in 3, especially when he's to the field. The single receiver to the field they give him room to run the slant a lot. So you're going to get like a spacing look to the boundary. So you have formation into the boundary, and now you have one receiver to the field, and you're hoping that the safety rotates and you get a one-on-one to throw the slant, right? Florida does it all the time. They played Miami this year. Miami was sitting on the slant and had to drop it off on 3rd and 7 down to the back, right? So against LSU, what do we see early? You see formation into the boundary. You see a single receiver. So Florida's tendency is that this is pretty much the same exact look they just motioned into against Miami. Tendency is to run some type of spacing and run the slant back here, right? That's a big tendency for Florida. If this guy's singled up, he's going to run a slant a lot of times. So what Florida does here instead, slant and go. You can watch here how he's turning out and kind of playing for the slant back here. You get the corner turned and beat him, and then you get a really great throw. So right here, slant, he starts to break on it. He's just turned, not even looking at the quarterback. He's just turned here looking for this thing coming back in. Badger sticks his foot in the ground, gets vertical, and Lagway makes a great throw for a back shoulder. So there's one tendency breaker. You're always throwing slant to the single when you have formation in the boundary. So now you go slant and go, big play for a touchdown. So another one. This is one of Florida's favorite kind of red zone-ish areas, just outside the red zone here. You see it's from the 25. But this is something they've done every year. Even here with the motion. So they're going to motion, and then you're going to get like a double crossing route. They love to do this in the red zone or kind of near the red zone. Like I said, here's the 25. So the motion, play action, double crossing routes. Right? Richardson takes off and runs here. This is later that year against South Carolina. They ran this against South Carolina for a touchdown last year as well. So this is a concept that you'll see them run a ton when they're down in this area, like the 30, 25-ish in. It's a big kind of play for them. So against LSU, they're a little bit further out, but look, the same kind of look here. Motion, deep crosser. DK runs the crosser, but then actually breaks back out. And you can kind of see how open he gets on this. The ball ends up going to Badger, but just another tendency breaker. So right here, it looks just like the previous play where you got the two crossing routes. Then DK breaks back out. Ball's probably, he's definitely an option here. And you can see it even better from the backside here. So the tendency is he's across, he's deep across, and you got him to the flat, right? So you see DK work across, and you see the corner start to peak kind of because he feels like he's going across because he's done that so much. DK breaks out. Could have had either one. The safety gets turned. Lagway rips a throw to Badger. Another great throw, great contested catch there from Badger. But the tendency breaker was the double crosser here. Then DK does a great job snapping it off there, and you see how wide open he gets. So there's another tendency breaker. This one on second down, we've talked about it a ton, bud. Like second down, second and long, you would have made a lot of money so far if you could just bet run or pass on second down and long in the Billy Napier tenure and just bet run every time. You'd be up quite a bit of cash. So second and 9, 4-point game, 4 minutes left. I think we even got a question about this in the postgame show. Could you believe that Billy let him throw? But second and 9, instead of waiting till third and medium to throw the spacing, they run it here on second and 9. LSU's probably thinking run, stay in this blitz call. Hansen opens wide up. Lagway puts it on him right away. And then you get a first down there. And then here's kind of another one we spoke about on Saturday, that Florida, this is a big tendency to run downhill and run boot this way. He's going to run a corner. But they also have split zone where if he can come and kick out and you're running split zone, right? So a real tendency when the tight end's coming across to run boot or split zone, which either one is happening since Florida only rolls right. They're both happening to the right. So if it was split zone, it'd be happening on this side. If it's boot, he's rolling, he's in the flat, he's in the corner, just like you see here. Opens front sides out, so that's the important thing, right? He opens to it. He doesn't open away and roll. He opens right to it. Here's earlier this year with Lagway. Front side to it. He's coming here. He's going to get the flat. The back's here. So it looks just like boot, looks just like split zone. And then against LSU, he opens to it. Here comes a tight end. Looks just like boot, looks just like split zone, and now flips it back away. Offensive line does a great job pinning and pulling people and kicking guys out, and back does a great job getting up inside. But those were just 4 examples of Florida going totally against normal tendency in the LSU game, and that's something I think a lot of people have been waiting to see, because it does feel at times like a little bit what's going to happen offensively for Florida. So really good job, I thought. They had a really good play on both sides of the ball, but I just wanted to show everybody kind of here's 4 plays that totally break tendency. So good job self-scouting, understanding how LSU may want to kind of jump on those things and play really tendency-driven defensive calls, and they're able to kind of pop some stuff open. So really good job and really good game plan by Florida against LSU there. So, all right, bud, we want to move on to Ole Miss, or do you have anything you want to say kind of about?
I think that.
Go ahead. You want to move on to Ole Miss here, bud?
Oh man, I'm so laggy on this computer. Here, let me get my phone, and then we'll do Ole Miss prep from that. All right.
All right, Bud's gonna go to the phone. I'll get the Ole Miss stuff up. So let's go. Let's start talking. First, let's talk a little bit about the Florida offense, because we just kind of spoke through some of their tendency breaker stuff. Let's talk about their play calling so far this year. When we get Bud back on, he can kind of explain more of this. But you see a lot closer run-pass split this year than it's been in previous years, I feel. And you see that the passing game, you're having some pretty good stuff in terms of EPA per play and success rate. So for people just joining us for the first time, these are Bud's play calling sheets. The SR column here is success rate. EPA per play is in the right column there. And now we've got Bud from the phone here.
I'm back.
All right, Bud. All right, so I just decided to throw up, since we were just talking about the Florida offense, I threw up their play calling sheet. What on here kind of stands out to you? I think this matchup, and we'll show the Ole Miss defense here in a second. To me, this matchup is the less interesting one this week, just because I think the story is pretty – like it's going to be pretty easy to figure out if Florida can be successful or not. But let's look at Florida's offense first. What kind of sticks out to you when you look at the Florida offensive numbers?
I think we're starting to see the passing game really take these next steps forward. Like we're seeing the EPA per play start to, step up a little bit there. Running success rate, we're kind of nearing that 50% threshold that we really want to see. We're doing a good job spreading the ball, I think, from the wide slot, tight end, especially trying to figure out kind of this next tight end. I feel like we've got Hansen, who's clearly separated, and then we've got to figure out one of Boardingham or Livingston to really go with it. But we've played well, limiting sacks. We're just below average. We don't quite get that 1%, but we're a little bit under the national average of 7%. Then we're doing a pretty decent job of limiting how much those sacks are hurting us. So we're doing an okay job of scrambling and not taking sacks in critical situations, which has been good. I mean, that's been stuff that has really hurt us in the past. Getting good success rate on the deep passing, I think that stands out. Doing pretty well against the blitz. Anything for you, Seth?
Yeah, like you said, the passing numbers, I think, seeing those, and the rushing numbers has really ticked up, I feel like, since early in the season. Especially you see the zone stuff, you're over 50% success rate now. Now the EPA is still low. That's probably turnover issues, right, in previous games. But seeing the success rate for the running back design runs kind of that high is a good sign. And then, like you said, the EPA kind of ticking up. Because last year, Florida had a really good success rate, but the EPA wasn't very good because it was so much more dink and dunk and kind of work your way down the field. Lagway's ability to push the ball vertically has been very helpful. I do think it's interesting that the middle field open, middle field close splits
Hmm.
are kind of that's somewhat sticks out to me. Florida's really good, or 49% success rate and 0.17 EPA per play against middle field open, so too high, which typically that's inviting you to run a little bit more. So that could be skewed a little bit there, maybe. But the kind of the zero for EPA per play with middle field closed is somewhat interesting. So I'd be interested to see what that is. I don't know if that's the man, because you see the man is kind of negative as well. But it's funny. There's a lot, and we'll talk about the defense later. There's like a big split in terms of how they play. I'd be really interested to see, and it's hard to suss out because of how like erratic kind of the playing time has been a little bit in terms of in game, when the difference in Lagway and Mertz. I'd be really interested to see kind of that broken out. But I know it's really hard because it's like in game. It's not quite the same, but that would be an interesting to see which of these are really being brought up and which is still being held down, I guess, by previous games. But Smokey Gator asked a question while we're looking at this. Do you feel like Russ Callaway has more input currently? I don't recall as many tendency breakers in the past couple of years. I don't know. My thing with the Russ stuff is because last year when Florida threw it well, there was a lot of it must be Russ calling plays. It's a lot of the same concepts over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen them break tendency like this. At time before they've tried some different things off, and they usually have they've had where they'll try to sell the crosser and bring it back as a part of their flood series, or like as a part of their Y cross series. So they've done it before. They haven't. I don't remember seeing those kind of particular looks. Now they've done slant and go before. I think Pearsall caught one against Utah last year. Maybe it was one of his big plays, or so they've tried it before. And I think they've tried some of these things before, but having a guy like Lagway helps them be a lot more successful. So
I think what I was going to say is to me, this doesn't look like, when we talk about tendency breakers, like in this context, we're not saying the scheme looks totally different. This is clearly a different play caller. If anything, this looks like the same scheme. We're going deeper in the book, right? We've turned the page. We're in the new chapter. We're in the advanced section where you put the wrinkles that build off your existing concepts that you installed earlier in the year. That's how I'm kind of viewing it, Seth.
Yeah, I was thinking about this today as well, just because this would be the stuff you thought, okay, this is what they're going to get to with Mertz in year 2.
Yes, I was about to go there.
But they're getting to it with Lagway in year 1. So I was I was thinking through it a little bit, and I did think that I think they've been coaching Lagway really for longer than they've been coaching Mertz. Now, not direct day to day, but Lagway's been doing their prep stuff since he committed, which was probably about a month, I think, before Mertz committed and came on campus. So I wonder if he's just really far ahead with what they like to do, so they can kind of accelerate a little bit, or if it's just that he's kind of a natural, he can get it, and they can kind of get to the second step. Because to me, it feels like first year with Anthony Richardson, first of all, they had to change a lot of the stuff they like to do, I think.
Yeah.
Second, and then the next year you got another first year guy that you're trying to get comfortable, that's kind of coming off of a rocky career up to that point. So it just felt like they hadn't quite got to this next step. So I'm not sure, Smokey. It could be Russ Callaway. It could be like influence, or he could say, hey, what about we could do this off this look? And that's always hard to suss out from here without being in the room. But it could just be the evolution of, you've got a guy that can do it, and now you can kind of move to the next thing. So I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it is nice to see, because I know everybody in the stadium thought on 2nd and 9 with 4.5 minutes left, they're running the football. And they motion out to empty, and everyone's like, oh, all right, well, they're going to run Lagway?
Yeah, they're going to run Lagway.
Actually
Lagway behind the formation. I think that's you kind of hit on it, but I mean, this is what makes Lagway's performance against LSU just really stand out. we talked about him coming off an injury and potentially getting limited reps that week, and how that would limit your potential game plan to go against LSU, to have wrinkles or things that take advantage of how they like to defend, your core plays. And instead, we kind of saw the exact opposite, where we saw us going deeper into the scheme and taking it to kind of these next level of wrinkles and building off itself. And I think that's really impressive, just from how they've been able to teach Lagway. Maybe they started that early, or how Lagway is a really effective learner and then executor of the scheme. So, I mean, just really impressive. And I think it's something to be positive about for both Billy Napier, the offense in general, whether it's him calling plays, whether it's him getting input from other people. To me, my guess is it's probably, Billy's playbook, that then now they have some extra guys like Russ on staff to build off, get creative with, and then having a guy like Lagway that seems to be like a sponge to actually be able to soak this up and implement and execute. It's great.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that sticks out from the play calling sheet here, speaking of Lagway, is the EPA on deep targets. I feel like that EPA and success rate on deep targets, I feel like that's much better than last season.
Yeah, 45% is very high.
So
on a deep target, it's tough to go broke if you're throwing the ball 20 downfield and you're getting it about half the time.
Yeah, that's a good combination right there. So that's Florida offense. Let's look now at the Ole Miss defense. I think, and we didn't want to spend as much time on this matchup because to me, the story is going to be, and we'll see. We'll look here at sacks and scrambles.
Ooh, yep, that's it.
The green is good for the defense here. The purple is bad. You look at sacks and scrambles. So Florida, for instance, had their offense had 6% of snaps were sacks or scrambles. Ole Miss defense 10%. Sacks and scrambles, and you can see the success rate in the EPA per play probably leads you to think, and I'm almost positive, just a lot more sacks than scrambles. And that's, I think, the key. Can you keep Lagway upright when he's limited in mobility? What's your plan there? And if you can do that, then I think you have some opportunities to make some plays down the field. But if you can't, like if Ole Miss can just kind of tee off and put on their pass rushing hats and just go, I think you could be in for a long day.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, you look right at the top of the sheet, and the things that jump out to me are the numbers on designed runs and the rates on the sacks and the scrambles. So really high rate of sacks and scrambles, getting 10% up there. That is a very disruptive pass rush. And then you look at the designed run numbers, 36 success rate, negative 0.24 EPA per play. That is a very good run defense. And all of this is telling us they've got a very good defensive line. And we know this, like you see stat sheets come out for who's SEC leaders in this, and it's a bunch of, Ole Miss guys right at the top. It's pretty impressive. They went out and identified trench talent and acquired it, which is not an easy thing to do. And they did it really well. They've got guys like Princely Umanmielen, who's having a lot of success there. And I think we thought that he might. He had a lot of success at Florida, has some problems maybe setting the edge, but has kind of found his role. Ole Miss wants him to rush the passer, and they say, do that, and that's what he does.
Yeah, I think that was, probably his big reason for leaving. We talked about it last year, and we talked about it a little bit in the preseason. He was your best pass rusher by far last year, but he was dropping into coverage like a quarter of the time.
Yeah.
I saw some numbers earlier this year. He was rushing almost every pass set. Yeah. So like he definitely got, and I think, if he did that at Florida, I wouldn't have been upset with the coaching staff. You know what I mean? Like, so he's in a role I think that suits him really well, and we've seen him make some big plays in games this year. But they've got a bunch of guys that can really get after it on the interior, on the edge. They're really tough. But I think if you're Florida, there's a couple purple spots here that would give you some hope. You see the deep target success rate or the deep target EPA per play. So you can hit some vertical shots on them if you can protect it. So to me, that's the story of the offensive game. Can you protect Lagway? If you can't, it's going to be a long night. So how do you do that? Maybe you have to run the ball a little bit more, but this is a pretty good rush defense too. Like we said, they got some big bodies up front. So you're going to have to be able to protect in the passing game, I think, to have a chance to win. If Florida can do that, which LSU was a pretty decent pass rush last week too, and they were able to hold them without a sack, and Lagway was able to get rid of the ball before taking sacks and avoid pressure like on that big throw to Badger. If you get another performance like that, you've got a shot. If you can't protect it, you've got really no shot in this game. So I think the story offensively versus the Ole Miss defense, that's a pretty easy one. Can you protect him or not? I think the more interesting side of the ball is the Florida defense versus the Ole Miss offense. Yeah. You want me to share the Ole Miss offense first?
Yeah, let's do that, because I think we can go through that, and then I think kind of end on big picture Florida defense.
So here's the Ole Miss offense. You see that high success rate, that high EPA per play, one of the best offenses in the country. Bud, what sticks out to you? I mean, there's a lot of deep greens on here.
Yeah. So when I see this and go up to the top and see, 53% success rate, 0.22 EPA per play, that's on all plays. That's really, really good. And then you look at the pass attempts, almost 60% success rate passing, almost a half a point, 0.4 EPA per play every time they're throwing the ball. I'm like, man, that's a very successful, that's a very explosive passing offense. We know this. That's like Ole Miss's thing. And so my thoughts go immediately down to the passing section. The deep passing must be off the charts. And it's really not. Like, they throw deep at an FBS average rate, which is really kind of interesting that they get so much explosiveness without necessarily taking a ton of risk throwing it downfield. And putting a lot of air on the ball. They're putting air on the ball, but they're not throwing those deep balls at an exceptionally high rate. And I think, to me, that's kind of saying that this is a pretty well-balanced passing attack, that they're going to take the efficiency when it's there, and they're going to take the explosives when it's there. And they've got a pretty good plan for knowing when to attack which and to get you in those situations. And then in the run game, it's the gap blocking. That jumps out, this gap scheme. Luckily, we've played a lot of gap schemes. We've got good experience. Florida's run defense isn't great, but we're good enough, I think, and we've been tested enough by similar gap schemes that I'm not as concerned about that aspect. But we're pretty banged up in our secondary. And this is a really good passing attack that has a lot of weapons, right? You see good numbers across the board. Thrown at everybody, they have a lot of success. So it's going to be a tough test. It's a game, I think, where we miss like a Pup Howard. So a guy like Miles Graham is going to have to step up a lot. You miss a guy like Jason Marshall. So Bridges is going to have to continue to play well. But it's going to be a tough test. What do you think, Seth?
I think the one that somewhat sticks out to me is kind of interesting. Now, they're pretty good against everything, so it doesn't really. But the success rate against man being so much lower, and the EPA is kind of coincides with that being a good bit lower. And then similarly, the success rate against blitz is pretty good, but the EPA is a little bit lower than their other passing. It seems like, but still pretty good. So I don't know if that it seems like they're blitzed a little bit more than average. So maybe that's something people have seen. But I got a few bits of film here just on the Ole Miss offense, just to kind of give you a flavor if you haven't watched them. Just pulled a couple of clips from their early drives against LSU, just to kind of see, maybe get a flavor for them. So here's one of their deep shots. And they actually don't connect on this one, but you see they do a pretty good job generating basically a double post here, hold one safety, and then you get the one even more vertical over the top. A good throw by the quarterback. Doesn't get caught, but they do a lot of good stuff in the run game as well. They're going to use some tempo. Here's kind of the more they use intermediate passing game, and then they'll mix in, this look. So you'll see where you got a bunch of hitches, and then you got one over the top here, splitting the cover two or the two high safety look, and another good ball by the quarterback. The run game, I think, is interesting. They run the quarterback a decent bit. Here's some RPO. So this is just kind of a good mix of what they do. 11 personnel. If you give them the gift outside, they're going to take it. If you give them numbers in the box, they're going to run it. They had some interesting kind of wrinkles in the run game in this game. Same idea here. If you don't give it, it's somewhat similar. It's not too dissimilar to Tennessee in terms of like idea, scheme, box count, that kind of thing, where if you don't cover people up outside, they're going to push the ball on the perimeter. But I think their passing game's more well-designed because of Kiffin's background and kind of the West Coast and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like a little bit of the Tennessee with a better passing game. Tennessee maybe has a better rushing game. But here's some gap. But they'll do a ton of quarterback run, especially quarterback gap run. So here's like off the jet sweep. You'll see a toss later where he tosses it, but a lot of times they'll do that to give it. Here's, I know I see people yell at Billy for running, 4 guys short of the sticks on hitches. So I just want to put that on here. Everybody does that kind of. So, well, this is a classic like West Coast concept. This is Hank. You got a guy over the ball, and then it's curl flat with one of the curls over the football. So it's a good mix of kind of the Tennessee stuff with the West Coast passing game. So, this is why everyone wants Lane Kiffin to be Florida's coach. It's a really well-designed offense. Here's a good look at they're going to pull. So this is a read. If the end widens with the pitch, the quarterback can keep it. If the end rushes upfield, he's just going to pitch it out to the back and run on the perimeter. So it's really well designed, makes you cover kind of everything. Then they do some fun stuff like this where basically the same idea, but now we're going to direct snap it to the quarterback or direct snap it to the running back, and he's going to keep it. So, really creative, really good, really well designed. They direct snap to the running back like 3 or 4 times early against LSU. So it's a really good offense. So
a lot of like that H-back in the backfield, like inserting on those runs too.
Yeah. So it's tall for my height, says not a super effective conventional run game. A lot of explosives comes from the quarterback. I think it's been like the last few games they've had some linemen hurt, they've had some running back hurts or some running backs hurt. It has not been, I don't think, as effective recently. I'm not sure where they are health wise with the offensive line and those backs, but it definitely seems to be a little bit tougher for them as of late running the football. But they're still, on the year, they're still pretty decent at it. But yeah, Dart can be a very explosive runner. So now let's throw up the Florida defense here. And there's some interesting things in terms of – so, but what stands out to you? I know we talked a little bit about there's been an interesting flip here in terms of where Florida was last year and this year. But what kind of sticks out to you maybe going into this week? Is there a particular spot of concern for you?
I mean, yeah, there's always a little bit of concerns with this defense. Even though we're playing better, we're still not, an elite defensive unit. Ultimately, we had a pretty good game plan against LSU is what I think it came down to. They did drive the field pretty effectively on us, a few times, and we just were able to limit them to field goals. So people don't need to be thinking Florida's defense is some juggernaut since we held LSU pretty well. But we've played good, I think, overall, for who we've got and for where we're coming from. This defense has taken a step forward. The sacks and scramble numbers significantly improved. Year over year, that has gotten better, and now that's making an impact where, we are actually punishing teams a little bit when they're dropping back to pass, where in the past this has been really hurt, not so much in the rates, but in the success rate in the EPA per play, because we were so bad at letting people scramble. We've been significantly better at that. That's been one thing I think this defense has shown a huge amount of improvement on. And then going down, we're doing pretty good. We're tending to play pretty light. We've been a little bit better when we've gone lighter. And I think we saw some of that against LSU. And then going into the passing attack, we've been pretty good taking away the wide receiver, been getting a little bit more burned by the slot and tight end targets. So watch that from Ole Miss. Deep targets, doing an okay, just about probably average on the success rate there. And then, getting burned a fair bit, but teams aren't throwing that many deep targets on us. That's good. I think that means our pass rush is generally getting there in a certain amount of time, which is great. And we're taking away the deep ball and asking them to throw the efficient passes in front, which is fine. I think that's kind of been the meta strategy we've seen a lot of defenses start to go to at the NFL level. And then kind of going in hand with that, we see this really high middle of the field open rate. So we're playing a lot of too high safety looks. We're not blitzing a lot. We're playing a lot of zone. So, you can think of these as, just deep cover two, style zones. And we're getting a lot of success out of those. Those are definitely our best pass defenses. We're seeing good success rate numbers and really good EPA numbers there compared to the inverse of that, which is what we saw at the beginning of the year, which was more cover three style stuff and a little bit more aggressive blitzing at times. Our blitzing game hasn't been very effective. We've gotten burned there. Our man numbers are okay, but the cover three stuff, we've really gotten away from that. And I think that's been the story of our defensive improvement.
Yeah. So early in the year, you mentioned kind of the one high cover three stuff. Miami really crushed it. And then Texas A&M crushed it as well. And you're going through and you're talking because the year before, Austin Armstrong, kind of his base is his defense off of more of a one high cover three look. And he's a lot more aggressive. So I thought early in the year, and we do have this. So this is kind of the year long numbers for the Florida defense. So but Bud also pulled, we thought going back and looking through the season, it seemed like a lot more too high started against Mississippi State. So that's week 4. And then you had the bye week and then Central Florida after that. And the defense has played pretty well since the bye week. So we wanted to look at kind of how has the play calling been different since week 1 through 3 and then week 4 to now. So here's kind of a look at it. This is the first 3 weeks of the season. Success rate, which is, I think this is an interesting point. Success rate, you actually held teams to a lower success rate the first 3 weeks of the season, but the EPA numbers are much, much higher. So you were maybe a little bit more aggressive. Is that kind of, and then so when you got burned, you got burned? Is that the thought, you think?
I think it's all showing up on those deep target numbers, right?
Oh,
right?
Lord.
You're giving up 1.4 points per attempt.
Yeah, that's pretty
That
bad.
means teams are throwing the ball twice and getting a field goal. That's insane, right? That's terrible. The middle of the field close numbers, they're really bad, right? 52% success rate, 0.37. That's pretty bad. Blitzing, almost a point every time we blitzed. So kind of the scheme we went into the season with, as early in the year, these are kind of your base concepts.
Yeah, and this looks a lot more like the Armstrong style defense.
Yeah. And so it might have been things guys were more familiar with. So they said, hey, let's try this out at first, but getting smoked on the blitz, getting smoked out of cover 3, and especially getting smoked deep. But, you can kind of look decent numbers, on designed runs, really bad sack and scrambles numbers, not a lot of the middle of the field open. And then we kind of see this shift happen starting at Mississippi State.
Yeah, so let's look at those numbers. So I think the ones that really I want to pay attention to the sacks and scramble number here. And then I do want to see the difference. I haven't looked yet of the run game stuff, which is because I think it's going to be kind of an interesting possible difference here that makes sense. So, sacks and scramble numbers much higher.
Yeah.
Much. So, success rate's better. So there was a 37% success rate weeks 1 through 3 and a negative 0.1 EPA per play. And now you see that's much better here in weeks 4 through 12. So the pass rush is getting better, or they're getting home a lot more.
Yeah.
And then the big difference, I think the other big difference is you see run success rate. 52% success rate. Previously, it was at 42%.
Yeah.
So why might that be?
Pull the safety back.
Just in the safety, you're going too deep safeties, right? So Florida's 44% middle of the field open. Weeks 4 through 12, weeks 1 through 3, they were 25% middle of the field open, 48% middle of the field closed. So that was really their base. You see now the base seems to be middle of the field open. So 2 high safeties. And the defense performance has been better. But this is something we talked about in the Georgia game and then now kind of the LSU game as well, where people that go back and look at the box scores will say, oh, well, they were able to move the ball really well, both teams. Like, they had such a big yardage advantage. The LSU game had such a big play advantage. I think Florida's just really focused on not giving up explosives, right? Don't give up explosives. Make people drive down the field. And you saw what had been a pretty good LSU offense this year, unable to consistently put together drives. I think I heard Josh Pate talking about it. He said they had 3 drives that totaled over 20 minutes of game time. So LSU had 3 drives that totaled more game time than Florida, more time in possession than Florida had the entire game. And they only came out with 6 points on those 3 drives.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, that was huge. I mean, making the opponent or convincing the opponent that they should kick a field goal is amazing, right? If they're going to spend all that time driving the field and they're only going to take 3 points for it, they can do that all day. I don't think Ole Miss is going to do that.
No.
I think Ole Miss is going to go for the explosives. And so this is where it gets into, how does Florida want to attack here? Kind of our best thing is to sit back. I think that works against LSU. I don't think it works as well against Ole Miss. I think you had a clip there of them, really effectively attacking one of those cover 2 shells and splitting the middle of the field open safeties.
Yeah.
And, so I don't think we can kind of play like we did versus LSU, which was, drop back. We played a little bit more middle of the field close versus LSU than middle of the field open. But when we did play middle of the field open, it was really effective. So those plays tended to stand out. And we were playing them kind of in interesting situations and almost for whole drives at times.
Yeah.
But the real big thing for LSU was we dropped into these zones and they really struggled with those, which was great. So I don't think we're going to be able to do that against Ole Miss. I think we're going to have to get creative maybe with the pressures, which will be interesting.
How much of this is basically also trying to get teams to play left-handed and just inviting them to run the football? Right. We talked about that. It's kind of the NFL, right? There's a lot of times where team passing had gotten so efficient that for a while teams were like, yeah, we'll let you run the ball. Go ahead. Do you think that's kind of what the idea is here?
I don't know, because we also
success rate has shot up.
Rushing teams.
Yes, the success rate has shot up, but EPA per play is 0.05 now. It was 0.02 the first 3 weeks, but there was a 42% success rate, whereas now there's a 52% success rate. So and the EPA per pass has gone from 0.23 to 0.04 in that same time frame.
I would much rather give up a successful run than a successful deep pass every day of my life.
Yeah.
So
it is kind of an interesting. That could be kind of the plan, like bend a true bend but don't break defense, which is
I don't know how
okay
that
played
works
away
against Ole Miss.
Yes.
I think that's the real hard part. I don't think Lane Kiffin is going to play that game, and I don't think Jackson Dart is. I think.
But who likes to play that game a lot is Kentucky. Like that's kind of their defensive MO is don't let you have explosives make you drive down the field.
Oh, that's what that LSU stat sheet looks like. It looks like a Kentucky stat sheet with all the zone.
So that is kind of, that's maybe that's your blueprint, right? No, I think Kentucky got some turnovers, got kind of like some really healthy turnovers, but they kind of played a bend but don't break style. And sometimes when offenses are really good, that's kind of they can start to press a little bit. And especially if they're really explosive and they're not getting those explosives, you can have a frustrating night. So I don't know, bud. It's a tough matchup, but I think you're playing a style that may give you a chance.
Yeah, maybe it's roll out a similar blueprint like you did last week. I mean, it's really, I think, our best shot, and maybe get some really effective, well-timed pressures, and be better on third down. Right?
Yeah.
Is that the secret sauce?
Yeah, we said last week we were 100%. We nailed it. You got to win the red zone battle. Florida got there once. I don't think LSU got in there at all. So we nailed that. Score in the red zone, finish drives, and then like friend of the show Bud Elliott says, red zone roulette. Just bend, but then once you get down there, bow up, make them kick field goals, and that's your chance. So I mean, it's an easy game. It's explosive plays, it's turnovers, it's finishing drives, right?
Yeah, which it's what makes it a lot of luck, and it makes college football highly variable, and it's why we all like watching it, is because Florida's definitely not favored in this game, but we could win this game. I mean, it's definitely not out of possibility, especially with the way Lagway's playing.
Yeah, I believe Ole Miss is still at this point a 10.5 point favorite or a 10-point favorite, somewhere in there. I'd imagine this would be with Lagway and his ability would make it somewhat a little bit more high variance of a game.
Yeah.
Sitting at 10 in most places, you could get 10.5 on Florida, but most places are 10. What do you think, bud? Do you think Florida can cover this at home, or do you think it's a tough matchup?
And everything's going so well for Florida right now. There's so much positive momentum. Why not? Let's say Florida covers this. Let's say Florida wins it. I don't think it's out of possibilities. I think. What is Florida winning this look like? It's Lagway doesn't throw a pick.
Yeah, you win. You win the turnover battle. You win the explosive play battle. You make them kick field goals.
I don't think they're going to kick field goals.
Well, I guess
so then it's
get off the field on fourth down, or
I
guess you kind of that factors in. You factor those into kind of turnovers, I suppose. So
I think I'll say it's sacks. I'll say whichever team ends up with more sacks.
Well, I think if Florida ends up with more sacks than Ole Miss, they've got a really good shot to win the game. I think is a good way to look at it.
I think so.
Because that's my biggest concern is the Florida offense with Lagway seemingly being limited mobility wise.
Yeah.
So when you get in some obvious passing situations, what's the plan to keep Ole Miss from really just teeing off? And I mean, this has not been a great screen team. And there may be some nice, well-timed screen opportunities, but this has not been great at it in the Billy Napier tenure. So, but they're going to have to slow down that pass rush somehow. And if you can run the football and control the clock, I feel like you got a good shot. But I would, if I had to lay my money down, I'd probably lay it the other way. But what's great is we don't have to do that.
Oh, so, on the money line, you're going. Yeah.
If I had to lay money down, I'd lay it on Ole Miss covering the spread. I just think they're a much better team. But oddly, they lost LSU, but I feel like they're a better team than LSU. But LSU and Kentucky have kind of given you a little bit of a blueprint for holding this. So, great example. LSU, Ole Miss gets down. I like Clayton's confident. I hope you're right, Clayton. Hit the money line. I like it. But Ole Miss goes down. One of those first two drives I showed some plays from, they get to a 4th and short inside the 10. They don't kick a field goal. They go for it. LSU stops them. So that's kind of you got to win some of these fourth downs.
Big stops.
So
had some big stops last week. I really don't think in college football you can undersell just a team believing in itself. Like getting that win like LSU, that is huge. You know, games at home. Team's got good momentum. Lagway is pretty effective moving in the pocket still, even with his injury. I thought that showed up on film versus LSU is taking pressures and turning them into pass attempts was really good.
Yeah.
And we saw Florida's pass rush really take a step forward against a good offensive line in LSU. So, you know, it's not out of the question that we're able to pressure them, kind of similar to last week.
Yeah, they've had some offensive line issues at times this year. They've had some health issues. I'm not sure exactly where they're at on that. I think they might be getting Trey Harris back, right? They're the really good receiver. He's been in and out. I know a few weeks ago they put almost half the team on the injured list, so I'm not sure if they've done that again or not. But we'll have to see kind of how it goes there. But should be a fun game, and I think you'll learn a lot about this Florida team in this game too. If they're able to kind of put on a similar performance, I think you got to feel really good about this team. You know, going into Florida State, going into possible bowl game, and then if they're able to somehow pull one off on Saturday. You know, I think you may see some nice recruiting momentum. They're going to have another good group in on Saturday. It seems like you got some guys returning from last weekend because it went so well. So if you can kind of put two in a row together here, you might be really, really getting some momentum going into Billy Napier year 4, which would be nice.
Absolutely. I mean, that is the shortest path for Florida to turn it around is to figure out how to make it work under Billy. And making it work under Billy is winning games like this, getting recruiting momentum, win the trench guys, win the in-state guys, win the zero-sum recruiting guys. Keep that going, and it starts to get much more believable that better days are ahead. So,
yep.
But
all right. Well, yes, got to go out and do it on the field. They did it last week. Hopefully, they can do it again this week. We may be back for halftime. We'll see how it's going. A halftime show, possibly.
All right. I called my shot on sacks being the one stat you can look at and say who won this game. Let us know in the comments what your one stat is, and then if you're right, we'll read it off in the halftime post game if it looks like it's trending good.
Yeah. What stat does Florida need to win besides points on the scoreboard?
Yeah.
Besides that, explosive plays, turnovers, sacks, tackles for loss, whatever, negative plays. Where does Florida need to win? If I could give you one spot for Florida to win, what should it be? Let us know. Smokey Gator says turnovers. I think that's a good one. Let us know in the comments here on YouTube. and we'll discuss it at halftime. Hopefully a fun halftime like last week was, and a fun post-game show like last week was. Until then, go Gators.
Go Gators.